Hi, guys. Hi, Amy Spain Duncan. I am an alcoholic. My sobriety date is March 6th of 2010. I am sponsored by a woman who is sponsored by a woman who is sponsored, and I sponsor women who sponsor women who sponsor women. And that, I love that. That is the miracle of the made usefully whole. I want to thank Allie. Allie, I am you and you are me. It's not often I find another woman and I hear my story. And I think some of the details are different, but definitely the length of sobriety, where we are in our journey, because you talked about the layers and you talked about levels of understanding and you talked about how you used to sponsor and how you used to receive and carry message and how you do today. And that, man, I can relate. And it was so good to hear you share all that with the passion and energy that you did. And just thank you. And Ollie, thank you for this and everyone involved in the Fellowship of the Spirit. This has been a lifesaver through COVID. And what I love about the Fellowship of the Spirit group, and if you get to that step 11 group, and that we really are kind of in a place with the sunlight of the Spirit, and that's the message. And that's what I love about all the things that you guys do and I get to be a part of. I'm actually at another conference right now, but I don't have to do anything. I'm just here as a participant, and it's amazing. And I have that tribe that Ali talked about, that tribe of women and men that are with us this weekend. And like Ali said, Ali did not text so late. We thought we would maybe gotten off the hook on that, but he did text last night, and I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to do this, and I'm happy to always discuss the program of Alcoholics Anonymous because, the three legacies: service, unity, and recovery. And in my own experience, I came to AA the first time when I was 25 years old, and I had what we call fellowship sobriety. For whatever reason, in my area at that time, people were living the steps. They were applying principles. There was a demonstration of action in their behaviors and the way they talked and the way they helped the new man. But there wasn't a big emphasis on the literature. And and I never read the big book. I stayed sober 3 years on fellowship, and the fellowship is a powerful mechanism, but I hadn't done any work. I hadn't worked the program of recovery where our unity lies, right? And I did service and I had unity, but I didn't have recovery, because recovery comes from the actions we take as outlined in that book. So my three-legged stool toppled and I was thrown into darkness. And it didn't happen right away. Alcoholism is very patient. It allows you to believe that you're in control and that you're making the decisions and you're calling the shots. I talked to a girl this morning who said she has a friend who's relapsed, but she said, I'm doing good because I'm only snorting this other substance. I'm not shooting it. And the delusion that means you're doing good, man. Talk about restored to sanity. And that's where I went. So I stayed that, as long as I was drinking at home, as long as I was, not doing this and not doing that, then I was okay. And then suddenly you're so deep in the mire, there's no way out. And that's what happened. I spent 10 years in the grips of alcoholism. And getting back and getting sober, the fellowship couldn't do that. I couldn't get sober on fellowship. My disease had progressed. My disease is terminal. I suffered alcoholism at 25, but at 37, I'm in the grips. And that means it has me and I don't have it. And I am past beyond human aid. So what's the solution to that? Well, that's where our beautiful 12 steps and the well-written book, Ali, I love that, the editorial she gave of the big book comes in. So in March 6th of 2010, I entered a homeless shelter because that's where my life was at that time. And they put a big book in my hand. And for the next 12 months, I was going to live in that homeless shelter and be part of this recovery program they had there. And part of that was going to be that literature of recovery, the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And the thing is, the fellowship's fun. The fellowship's full of laughter and everybody smells good and people are funny and no one's mad and the fellowship is easy. But the work, the leveling of pride, right? The destruction of self and ego, the risk it takes asked us to take, the work that is uncomfortable. And that is why you have to have this gift of desperation, right? Our 12 and 12 says, no alcoholic is willing to, do this kind of thing unless their life actually depends on it. So at 37, I was beaten into a state of reasonableness, but I just kept coming to your meetings for 2 years thinking, why isn't it working? I'm drinking your coffee. I'm holding your hand. I'm saying your prayers. Why can't I get sober? Because I was trying to get sober on fellowship once again. And it wasn't until 2010 that I finally said, okay, I surrender. Give me the work. Give me the work. And I want you to know, I'm just the big book didn't make a lot of sense to me at first. You always start with all the prefaces and the forward, and then you get in Bill's story. And honestly, I was so far gone mentally, the damage that blows to the head from living on the streets. And I'm rager and I like to get in fist fights with people, cops, men, it doesn't matter. I'll fight a light post if I'm drunk enough. And so things didn't make sense. My brain was damaged. And so it was hard for me to understand and read what I was reading. And I had a sponsor and she said, have you read Bill's story? And I was like, yeah. She was like, what did you get out of it? And I'm like, I don't know really a lot. And so I needed that information broke down for me. And she said, it's important that the information moves from here to here. It can't be information that you read and understood because self-knowledge avails us, it's not going to help you. It's not a defense against the first drink. What this has to, my sponsor says we have to digest it. You have to digest this. And anyway, if you're struggling with that or you're not sure, my experience was that my sponsor took me to the first full paragraph on page 6 of Bill's story. And it says, the remorse, horror, and hopelessness of the next morning are unforgettable. She said, you know what that is? And it washed over me because I know the horror and hopelessness and remorse of the next morning. When you missed that big event you were supposed to be at, when your child has celebrated a birthday and you forgot to call. When you promised yourself you weren't going to do this again and you wake up and you did. And the job's gone because you're late again. And the family's mad because you've messed up again. I know that remorse and that horror, just that first line. But she made me read on. The courage to do battle was not there. My brain raced uncontrollably. God, the intrusive thoughts. I used to say it was like sitting next to a highway where semi trucks were going past, just choo, choo, choo. And I couldn't grab a thought to think of it for any length of time. I was badly mangled. So much of this I could relate to, and it talks about the writhing nerves and the will to do battle. And should I kill myself? The suicidal thoughts and intentions, the hopelessness of that. But this last line, Jen would fix that. So 2 bottles and oblivion. Man, I know what that means. Now I'm relating to Bill. Now I know what Bill's feeling because I felt that. And even though Bill was a stockbroker and Allie was in South Florida and I was on the streets in Louisville, we all know that. You know that because you have what I have. We have alcoholism. So you know what the horror and remorse and regret. And you know the oblivion that we seek, that we look for in that gin or whatever your bottle is, right? That's my relief. I have to blot out the intolerable consciousness of my existence. Whoa, you've got my attention. Now I'm on fire for that book. Now I'm eager to read and I'm blown away. How did they know? How did they know? How did they know? I get into parts of that book where it tells me that by every form of self-deception, I'm going to try to prove myself a normal drinker, right? And it says, I'll take a trip. I won't take a trip. I'm only going to drink gin. I won't drink hard liquor, right? On page 31. And I thought, that's what I did. See, when I left you in 97, right after I'd had a few years of sobriety, that's what I did. I tried this and I tried that. And I wanted to, what Allie said, I wanted to control and enjoy my drinking, right? And that was my quest when I left you. And I couldn't get it. And there it was. It's like you knew what I was going to do, right? And then I was able to kind of relate to that, but I also found hope in the big book. And I remember being just 60 days sober, sitting at that homeless shelter and opening that book and reading, there is a solution. And tears dropped from my eyes and fell to that page. What good news. What good news this book held for me. And so I became a seeker, a studier. And at the homeless shelter, well, you're a big book thumper. Daggone right I am. This is the instruction manual I've been searching for since I was 7, And then I found myself getting angry at AA that why didn't they give me this when I was sober the first time? Why did they let me believe fellowship would be enough when I needed the work? I needed the steps. I needed this connection. I needed this understanding. I needed to know what alcoholism was and the physical allergy and the mental obsession and, the countless vain attempts. But it wouldn't have mattered because you're only ready to receive what you're ready to receive. And I wouldn't have believed you. I wouldn't have believed you because alcoholics think we're different, right? They told me I shouldn't drink again. They withheld nothing. My sponsor this time, helped me with that resentment. And she was like, did you go to meetings? I'm like, yeah. She said, did they read how it works? I said, yeah. She said, and they read the part about rarely have we seen someone fail who thoroughly follows our steps. And I was like, yeah. She was like, and you didn't do the steps. I was like, yeah. Where's my part? What did I do? And I didn't. And I know women that stayed sober 10 years before Joe and Charlie came out, and that emphasis in Alcoholics Anonymous shifted back to literature and steps and program. She stayed sober and she didn't know Joe and Charlie till she was 10 years sober. And thank God she met him because she said it changed her entire sobriety. It changed her relationship with God and her relationship with others and the magic that is included in it. I drank because I wanted to drink. I drank because I wasn't willing to go to the step study or read the book. That information wasn't withheld. I chose not to do that. I chose not to seek that. And I got what we get when you're not willing to do the work, right? I love the 9-step promises. And I always say, it says at the end of the promises, that if we work for them. And I always say to my girls, work, work, work. That's where it is. We have to work for this. We have to be willing to expose ourselves, to be vulnerable, to level our pride, to continue to work, to find humility, to seek. It's like Allie said, when everything's good, I'm not changing nothing. Everything's great. It's golden. I'm going to ride this. It's only when I'm uncomfortable, when there's a bump in the road, when I'm affected, that I'm willing to go into 10 and do the journaling, go into 11, go into 6 and 7, return to the book. It's only, Alex reminded me this morning, there was a speaker that said, he was talking about taking men through the book. And he's like, if I had got to read that Dog Girl one more time, I'm going to lose my mind, right? I'm not going to go back and read it unless I'm taking a new woman through it, unless I'm at a step study or a big book study. Right? I have to be willing to continue to seek and find that new information. I was at that homeless shelter. I was about 30 days sober. My father was 20 years sober when I got sober. And he was probably the only member of the family that had any compassion or understanding for me by that time. We make our families neurotic, and they were hurt and they had so much pain and disappointment. But Dad, because he has what we have and he was sober in these rooms, he had a different compassion for me. And so he was the easiest person to call. He only got so many calls. He had to use the pay phone, and I didn't have much money. So I would call my dad. And I called him one night and I said, what are you doing, Daddy? He said, I'm reading Bill's story. And I said, haven't you already read that? And he laughed. He said, Amy, we We keep reading it. And I didn't know that. I was like, Bill's story, I've only been here a month and I'm on there as a solution, step it up, old man. How'd you get 20 years sober? Because I didn't know that we continue to return to that information, like Ali said, and we get new things from it when we do. I would not be alive without the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I would not be sober and happy. I would not be willing to seek the promises. Not only did it break down, it explained things that I could not account for. I thought I was bad. I thought I was bad. There was something wrong with me and I was not like you, and you were good and I was bad. And no matter how much I wanted to be good, I was always going to be bad. And you said, you're not bad person trying to be good, Amy. You're a sick person trying to be well. And I doubted you. I thought maybe you're a sick person trying to be well. But I've been in trouble since I was 7 years old. I continually hurt people. I break promises. I do things I don't even want to do. I'm bad. And that book started giving me some relief. It started giving me a doctor's opinion about what was wrong with me. It gave me a diagnosis. Now I can become properly armed with some facts about myself and this disease. Now I don't have to surrender to the drink. I know that I can be uncomfortable and stay sober. I know that there are layers to this thing. I know that there's greater things ahead. As good as it felt, I'm like Allie, a year sober, I'm still living at a homeless shelter and I'm happier than I've ever been in my life. And I live with 200 other women. I got a roommate and I see my kids on Sundays. And I thought, man, this is the best I've ever had it. Right? It gets better. It gets even better than that. If I don't let the spirit get blocked out by the clamor. So I like Allie, I went back to school at 3 years sober and I got that associate's degree. And then I stayed in school and I got a bachelor's degree. My life has continually improved materially, right? Because that just comes with going to work. Turns out, if you go to work every day, you start getting some financial security and you don't spend it all at the liquor store. So just by living right, I got some of those things. But it's more than that. It's the gratitude. Last weekend, I was with my daughters. They're grown, my grown children. And we'd gone down to Florida to see the manatees before they migrate out of Crystal River. Because we love that, And I'm there with my 3 girls. And they're grown and they talk to me. And they love me and they admire me. And I get to be their mom today. And I'm standing on the beach and they're laying in the sand. There's a drum circle over to the right. And I drop to my knees and start weeping in grace and gratitude. I hope I never forget the miracle that I get to do these things today, that I have been picked up and from the scrap heap, that I've been saved, a wretch like me, to live a useful and productive life. The information is in the book. I think it is good to go through the book with someone else. There was so much I didn't understand. There were so many things that didn't make sense. If I'd done it alone, I would have said, I don't get it. I don't get what Bill's talking about. I would have never seen the stages of Bill's suicidal ideation. I wouldn't have noticed that Bill said, I would never jump off. And up by page 6, Bill says, should I kill myself? And a page later, Bill's moving his mattress to the ground floor so that he doesn't jump from the 2nd story window. I wouldn't have seen the truth and the patterns, the pain and the misery that existed in Bill's story before he found before he formed Alcoholics Anonymous, before his white light experience. I wouldn't have seen the magic of that. I wouldn't have related the way I relate. And then from there, once I'm sold on that set of ideas, once I've bought in, then it sets me out on a vigorous course of action. I wouldn't know that there's not a chapter called Into Thinking, right? I would still be using this alcoholic brain to figure out all the problems of the world. I wouldn't know to keep it simple. I wouldn't know to rely completely on my higher power. I wouldn't know what to do when I am doubtful, right? Or agitated. It gives me clear direction. I didn't know how to pray. I was undisciplined, but I allow God to discipline me in the way that is outlined on 86 and 87. And I say those prayers and I do those things, and I take other women through the book and we do the prayers and we do the things. You know, I'm not a sponsor that has any packets for you when you get sober. I've got this 164 pages, and we're going to read the book and we're going to do what it says. All right. And I'm going to couple that with traditions and concepts and unity and service. We're going to get busy in service, right? And we're going to continue and practice and improve on these things in 10, 11, and 12. And when I get in the mire and I haven't done a thorough 10 because things have been great and I'm going to let that slide and that wasn't a big deal. And everybody does that. No need to inventory at it, right? Because I don't like to always do the work. And then I find myself on fire, knee deep in poop, right? And my sponsor will say, you're back to 4. I want a full inventory. You've neglected 10 so long. We're back on 4. And then I got to do a 4-step inventory and a 5th step. And I got to revisit 6 and 7. It is a design for living that allows me to stand in the sunlight of the spirit and hopefully be beneficial to someone else, to have healthy relationships with my children and my family. I love that you talked about family, man. It's so important, the living amends I have to that. The living amends to myself, my community, society as a whole. Like the book lets me do all of those things, the instructions, right? And then I follow the instructions and I get to live this fabulous, wonderful life. I can't not tell you that my favorite promise in the big book is on page 100, because I laid in that homeless shelter. And at that time, I didn't even have a room. I was in a bunkhouse because you have to go through phases. So I was at the beginning of this program and I was in a bunkhouse with 67 other women, and life was good because I was sober. And I didn't know if I'd talk to the kids again. I didn't know if I'd ever own a car or if I'd ever leave that homeless shelter or if I'd ever get a job. And my sponsor said, I want you to go to page 100. And it says, if you persist. If you persist, remarkable things will happen, no matter what your present circumstance. And that promise I held on to. Now, that promise had some stipulations, like all the promises, right? It says you and the new man must walk day by day on the path of spiritual progress. But if you persist, remarkable things will happen. I've never heard anything in the big book that wasn't true. No promise made that wasn't fulfilled. But that is by far my favorite. And with my girls, I tell them persist through COVID, persist through depression, persist through death and grief and breakup and loss, and persist. And if you persist, remarkable things will happen. Ali, I thank you so much for allowing me to be here. I don't know what time it is. I'm trying to get us back on schedule. So that's my service for today if I'm early. Thank you all.
Thank you.